Hello.
Hello again, Thoth. How's it going?
Interesting to connect to you again. I'm curious about your inquiries here and your reasons for having any inquiry to begin with, considering me or my people or my influence in your world. So I'm attentive.
Well, in order for me to answer that, maybe you can ask that question to yourself because basically I'm interested in just talking to you to get information about history. And like the way I understand it, I mean, maybe a lot of information we have about you is inaccurate, but I think like you're very interested in, history and like record keeping and kind of stuff like that. So like one of my questions I was planning on asking you later is like if that's true that you like history, I was going to ask like why do you like history so much? Because that's something Kalask asks me all the time. They're like, why do you care about history so much? So I don't know. Like first of all, I guess like yeah, my first question to you, like, do you consider yourself to be like a historian or like a record keeper or what?
Yes, those two terms are very accurate and they're one and the same for me and my kind of viewers in general. It's the way we function. We are more interested in keeping records, keeping certain ideas, and the malleability of certain ideas, as they're not necessarily always as you literally call written in stone or a stone tablet or emerald tablet, as I'm familiar with. There's also this erroneous ideas of their being somewhat related to me directly, which is not the case. However, the point being, history is more malleable than you might think from a current perspective and your understanding of time, but not just history, but also the future, which essentially is exactly the same. It's just a different perspective of the same aspects. Time works differently than you think, so therefore future and history are more or less malleable in the same fashion.
Okay.
And this represents an eternal possibility, and that's what I find interesting.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, like, based on like the limited amount of information I know about you, like, I would consider myself to be more similar to you than to like any other, extraterrestrial being I've ever, interviewed or talked to or whatever. I mean, like, I'm interested in history and like, learning about Atlantis and Egypt and stuff like that. Um, so like, and like I said, Classic asked me like, why do I like history so much? And I kind of told him, I don't know, it's just interesting. I just like it. So I don't know. I don't really have a good question. I mean, I don't have a good answer to that question. So like, let me ask you, like, why do you like history and record keeping so much?
That assess the influence on anything that is perceivable in reality, because history again and future are both being created from the present, so it's not just about keeping but also influencing. So the more you understand those concepts, the more you also have a possibility to manipulate them in a certain fashion. In your perspective, you might simply call it learning from history, learning from past lessons, mistakes, or successes of others and yourself in a way, because ultimately the only thing you can see in others in history or in the future is something you also create in yourself. Obviously, since things are not on a timeline the way you think, it's not really just learning from other people, and it's not just learning but also influencing. But that's likely somebody from your perspective of reality would look at it, learning from history, so to speak, except it's not just learning, but it's co-creation.
Okay.
It's the fabric of reality itself that I find interesting, which in your translation would be being a historian or record keeper. It's also a record creator and a history writer. Remember, many of your people that write down your history are not just writing down history in a sense that they're keeping it, they're also writing history in terms of their creating history or historical events, that you're referring to both understanding your language to writing history if you write a book or if you create events that then later come down as history. Both is called writing history or creating history, and it is quite indeed literally the same.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's why I'm interested in history, basically. I mean, I just
Now
like,
you have an answer.
yeah, now I have an answer. Yeah, I mean, I like Atlantis is like one of my favorite topics. I mean, most people on Earth think that, Atlantis didn't even exist. It was just a myth that Plato made up. And I like learning about it and, sharing the information with other people. Um, And yeah, I mean, just having knowledge and sharing it with people is the reason that I like talking to you and Meetax and Kalask and others. Um, so like anyway, like I guess like one question about you, well, like a few questions about you personally. Like first of all, like can you describe what your physical body looks like? I mean, like for example, is there a certain bird that your species seeded on Earth that you look similar to, or like that we would be reminded of?
Sperber, perhaps.
What spell that, please?
I'm not certain if that's the correct term from your language or another language that I'm finding this person. My depiction is not 100% accurate, but the bird chosen is correct. It's just that I didn't necessarily look exactly like the depiction, but the bird that it depicts is the most that looks the closest to me. My
Okay,
body is very ectomorph.
it's what?
Ectomorph.
What does that mean?
A certain body type. Again, I'm just using words and finding in this person. I have to somehow relate and interpret those ideas so I have a way to communicate with you as you cannot interpret my thoughts directly. My arms and legs are fairly long compared to the torso. My throat is fairly long compared to the torso, and to the side of the head, I don't have much what you would consider body fat or
Okay,
muscle mass.
okay. Like about your beak, like our Egyptian hieroglyphs show it as being like really long, and like
Yes,
I remember like even when I was in high school, like when I saw the pictures of you like in our textbook, I was like, boy, that seems like a really like kind of a long like an unusual beak. I mean,
yes,
it seems like impractical. Is your beak really that long?
no.
Okay,
That's why I was referring. It is likely a literal depiction of a certain alien species. Again, I can't find a correct term in your language in this person. That was used later on, as I look somewhat similar to the species, but not like literally having the head of my body is less human-like and my head is less bird-like than in those depictions. Obviously, as a more smoother transition. It's a more not necessarily hybrid between the two species, but the idea is my head is more perhaps what you would call human-like, and the body is perhaps what you call bird-like, and the beak is not extremely long, no.
okay. How tall are you?
Approximately 3 or 4 meters.
Oh, wow. Okay. Are you covered in what we would consider feathers?
To some degree, yes, not very long, not to the degree that the respective bird would be, but they're softer and they're not as thick, but I have something like feathers, yes,
What color?
over a large degree of the body.
What color are they?
Perhaps what you would consider rainbow color. They're shimmering and different, depends how the light falls, and they're more bluish greenish in most times.
Okay,
They can also appear black from a larger distance.
okay. Do you wear clothes or anything like that?
Sometimes perhaps ropes or something similar, sometimes also something practical, like a belt that carried certain devices, etc. Something usually I don't wear several layers of clothes. I understand some of your people as light clothing.
Okay. Um, I think whenever you were talking to, like the last time I talked to you, like during the group session, somebody else asked you if you consider yourself light or dark, and I might have misunderstood you, but it sounded like you were saying you were more neutral and like basically you're only interested in information, not anything having to do with light or dark. Is that correct?
It is correct. It's also a certain way to interpret energy. I could also say I'm perhaps more dark because I'm coming more from an intellectual perspective than emotional. I understand those topics are interesting to some people that like to differentiate between either one or the two in dualistic concept. I interpret energy differently than being what you would consider lighter or darker, perhaps more intellectual, emotional, and more on the intellectual side. I understand it's more associated with so-called dark, but it depends on the perspective. I don't associate it necessarily with those concepts you're using in some of your religion or different interpretations you have in your work.
Okay. Um, What?
You can then call this neutral.
Okay, right, right. Yeah, I mean, I consider myself kind of neutral too. Like I just care about information, not not choosing between light or dark or any of that stuff. But anyway, well, I was going to ask you what dimension you're in, but I mean, I'm sure it's probably like you're in multiple dimensions, right?
Well, depends on what version of me you're talking about. Remember what I said earlier about history and future. Currently, I'm speaking to you from the fifth because it's the best way I can relate information to you. But in all physical dimensionalities, I have existences, even your third, if you're referring to a version of mine that was and is to a certain degree on your planetary body in the Egyptian era and Atlantean era.
Okay. Are you willing to share which planet you're on now?
Well, currently I am on a ship, but it's in the Orion region.
Okay. Can you say where and when you were born in terms of your current incarnation as Thoth?
I hatched on a planetary body. I don't believe you have a name for it, but I also live for a certain degree on your planet you call now Mars. When I was located in your solar system when I was a younger age, so if I was growing up or if you wish.
Okay, how long ago?
Now I'm on a planetary body or near a planetary body where we're currently stationed that is not too dissimilar.
Okay. How long ago were you born?
Well, again, referring to the perspective of time, it's different, but it's at least thousands of years ago from your perspective. In terms of like my last incarnation, there was also at a contact with your world, but ultimately a millions of years old.
Okay. How long is your lifespan on average?
Well, 1,000 years is very common in a certain region, but I can get in and out of bodies at will.
Okay.
So it depends what you will consider life. You understand death is not what you think it is.
Okay. I might have misunderstood you, but I thought you had said like you said you were born millions of years ago, and then
Yes,
you said like your lifespan is 1,000 years.
yes,
I'm confused. Like how does that work? Like are you?
yes,
Yeah, can you explain that, please?
yes. That's what I was going to do. The ideas I can jump in and out of bodies. It's a possibility to also manipulate time to the degree. Or it's not just a possibility, you're doing it anyway. If you're aware of it or not, you're jumping in and out of bodies, so it really depends what you consider one lifetime. And since time is malleable, you can also have a future lifetime before a past lifetime. As confusing as it might sound to your collective mind, don't worry about it. Your subconscious can interpret if your conscious mind cannot. So, for example, I can still keep a body in stasis. I understand the person I'm speaking through right now has done the same thing. The idea is when you keep a body in stasis, you go to another lifetime that can be parallel, past or future, and you continue on there and have another life for 1,000 years. And then your other life still exists, and you come back to that life and continue living that life. And ultimately, your soul, if you wish, is eternal. But if you remain in a certain species for a million years, it's considered a lifetime. But at the same time, you can move and back and forth in between, including into different species, and you live a present a parallel life in another species while your body that you originally had is in stasis. So it greatly depends if you consider it a part of the lifetime while it's happening simultaneously. And if you add the lifetimes that you're having simultaneously on top of each other to create a longer lifespan, or if you see them all going on for the same lifetime because they're simultaneously.
Okay. Um. All right. So
If that makes sense to you.
yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that again. It's a little bit confusing, to be honest, but
Yes, the nature of time understands confusing to people in a certain dimension. It's normal.
yeah, it is definitely.